Salutations everybody, Feeso here, and today we're going to be looking at One Piece chapter 904. Now, it's been 2 weeks since our last chapter due to Golden Week in Japan. However, I'm sure a lot of us are eager to see where the story of Reverie is going. Now, one disclaimer I want to say before we begin, I won't be doing the traditional recap before my analysis. Instead, I would rather just get straight into the meat of it and discuss the major plot details. Now, this is largely because of time constraints in my real life. However, if you prefer this format, please let me know, because something I've always taken issue with is when someone labels a video a review, when all they really do is recap what happened. That's something I'm hoping to move away from. However, I do find that giving context to the critique does help a lot. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into this. We've got a cover page. It's showing Orlambus resigning and the king's really angry, but let's be honest, I don't care about this cover story. Honestly, for me to really care, a cover story has to be about characters who I'm invested in. And one of my biggest issues with Dressrosa was the limited amount of time we got to spend with the members of the Grand Fleet. Now, while initially I hoped that we would get more background about these guys in the cover pages, I've come to realize that that's a bit naive of me. The cover pages are a lot less complex than that, and they mostly tell small little charming stories and give us an update from the characters we've grown to love in arcs gone by. And a lot of them have come back to become super relevant, but at the moment, I just saw these guys in Dressrosa, and I wasn't too invested in them at that point. So I'm not really that invested in this cover story, at least not until I get to read it all back to back and see how it works out. So without further ado, let's just skip right ahead to the actual meat of the chapter. Now, the chapter opens on Newcomer Island. We see Ivankov is now hosting the Revolutionary Army get-together. So it was moved from Baltigo after the Blackbeard attack and just relocated here. And we get confirmation that Sabo and Dragon and everyone are all okay. That is a huge relief, because a lot of the more cynical members of the One Piece fandom had predicted that it would be just like the first part of One Piece, where Ace was in jeopardy because of Blackbeard and Luffy would have to go and rescue him. Having confirmation that Sabo is fine, it's okay, we're moving on to a different kind of story, that to me is the biggest thing to take from this chapter. But it's not the only big thing to take. We get confirmation that Germa 66 has been kicked out of the Reverie. Now, from the backstory about Germa 66 that we got, we know that they used to rule the North Blue. However, they were expelled by the world government, or rather the Navy. After that, there was some warring about reclaiming the North Blue, but eventually a peace was signed and they became an honorary nation in the world government, basically biding their time before they can build resources enough to reconquer the North Blue. They were doing this on the down low, however, I think it just avoided problems for the Navy, and that's why the deal was struck. Now, we know that Judge was doing some really shady things, such as pursuing cloning and all these other shady technologies, but the sticking point in all this was, of course, the deal with the Yonko. There was no way it wasn't going to get out that Sanji was marrying Pudding, and that news eventually would have reached them, and so it makes sense that they're expelled. However, for them to have been expelled, they must still be alive. So this is also confirmation that Germa in some shape or form survived the onslaught from Big Mom. Because if they were actually wiped out, there would be no point in just saying that they were kicked out of the Reverie. At least that's my opinion. On that same note, we learned that Sabo and the rest of the revolutionaries learned what went down on Whole Cake Island. So the news has obviously been widespread, we saw that in the last chapter, but I was curious about how Sabo would react to Luffy basically leapfrogging him in terms of bounty. Now, we know that Ace and Luffy to a certain extent were very competitive. However, Sabo, while still competitive with Ace, was the most mature of the three brothers in my opinion. So it makes sense that he reacts as he does, with a giant grin on his face and just basically not talking for a while, just taking it all in. because Luffy's on his way to achieving his dream. And unlike Ace, Sabo's ambitions have nothing to do with piracy. It's for that reason I think Sabo stands out as a distinct character from Ace. Ace was much more internally focused. He wanted reassurance and a place to be accepted in the world. Sabo just wants to change the world. He wants to make it fair. And the divide which he saw as a child between the noblest of society and the poorest of society, he thought was unreasonable, and quite frankly he felt it was suffocating him. So his ultimate goal seems to be to tear down the system of the world government. Which leads us nicely to our next point. We find out that Dragon is ready to wage war on the celestial dragons. So this is very hype information. It's about to get real, because we've been waiting to see what the revolutionaries could do for a while now. Dragon, being stated to be one of the most dangerous and wanted men in the series, has made the entire organization seem almost mythical, like they're part of the end goal of One Piece. So now that we're getting more details about it, it is really hitting me that One Piece is really accelerating its story. Before this arc started, if you asked me, I would have said that we are about 65% through the story. Now I'm leaning more towards 70% to 75%, just because of how huge everything seems to be getting. But we'll have to wait a little longer before things actually get crazy, because what this chapter really is a showcase for the commanders. Sabo gets called up and told that they've run into a bit of a snag and they'll rejoin the meeting later. So Sabo and Dragon are going to continue with their plan, but the rest of the commanders will join in soon enough. So where are the rest of the commanders, you might ask? Well, they're dealing with a jabroni. Pinkbeard. Oda, why? Like, these designs for Brownbeard, Pinkbeard, Weevil, they all just come off to me like Whitebeard Light or Diet Whitebeard. Like, they're just wannabes, and that's the point. They're meant to look really pathetic, just taking the name of a great pirate. In this case, it's more likely to be a spoof off of Blackbeard, but either way, they're taking the name of a great pirate and using their reputation. They have similar names too. It's just a bunch of grandstanding, and it's just kind of meh to me because I know what this guy exists for. He exists to be beaten down by the commanders just as a showcase of all of their shticks and powers. It works very effectively for an introduction, however this is not the first time we've seen it in One Piece. Frankly, it's getting a bit tired to go through this loop over and over again. I think that there could be more interesting ways to introduce characters like this. We had a similar scene just recently in the anime, where the Charlotte family, or at least the major commanders, were all introduced. We got to see Oven and the others just beating up a bunch of pirates. And yeah, there's many scenes like that, just a showcase. And that's basically what the rest of this chapter was. Now that's great because we get to see the designs of these characters and work out their shticks, because they're clearly going to be a significant part of the story moving forwards, but at the same time, compared to some of the previous chapters we've had, it's a lot less packed in terms of content. This means on a week-to-week basis, the pacing kind of suffers, but read back-to-back in a volume, I think that this chapter will fit right in with no real issue. It's just we've had a lot of meaty chapters recently, so to have such a by-the-numbers introduction chapter makes it seem a bit deflating in my opinion. But all that being said, as an introduction goes, this is quite effective. We've got the typical villain basically tormenting the villagers. Pinkbeard, you can see Momo is on his belt right there. He's basically telling everyone that they're going to give him everything. He's under the banner of Blackbeard. They can't mess with him. The citizens say the only thing they have is some gold to offer the celestial dragons, and they only can afford to give them that because they'll be killed otherwise. So yeah, we've got more heelish tendencies from the government. This of course paints a desperate situation where both a criminal element and the government are making life hard for the civilians. So of course they're going to turn to the characters who are about to show up. So Pinkbeard, building up some heat like a good heel, slaps around one of the civilians, and we get an intervention by a giant. This giant, his name is Morley. Forgive my pronunciation, I think I'll have to wait until the anime to know how to properly say these names. But his name is Morley, and yeah, it's a design. He looks very typical for a giant character from Oda. A bit on the silly side for me, but his shtick is kind of hilarious. He's actually an Okama, he speaks in a very effeminate way, and when people gaze at him for a long time, he thinks that they've got a crush on him. So yeah, he's kind of distorting the ground around him, which makes some of the characters think that he has a devil fruit power, but maybe it's just him being a giant, who knows really. But he comes burrowing out of the ground, everyone's confused, and then he attacks with his trident. So of course the people are wondering who their saviors are, and that harkens the arrival of all of them. We've got 4 of them to run through, so let me talk about each one in turn. Morley, he's an Okama giant, as I said before. There doesn't seem to be much going on there character-wise. His shtick is to think people have a crush on him by staring at him too long. We've got Betty, who has a shtick of basically putting down people who are weak, but encouraging them when they stand up against authority. Her power is that she's really good at motivating people. She waves a flag, and of course she ate the cheer cheer fruit. Now in my opinion, this kind of power is just hilarious to me. Oda could have made her just be really inspirational and good at giving speeches, but instead he made it a devil fruit power. Now this might have balancing issues if she can influence the minds of people who are against her, but ultimately it just seems like she can motivate people. And yeah, in the grand scheme of things, it might seem like a useless power, but if you can raise your own army, why not? However, her with the flag might be a reference to this 1830 painting called The Liberty Guides the People. It's a French painting, and shout out to Galaxy for pointing this out to me. I think it's very likely the source of this, and honestly, seeing the other things that have inspired Oda over the years, this doesn't seem like too much of a stretch. Next up, we've got a person who looks like a mink. His name is Lindbergh. He is the commander for the south. Betty, I forgot to mention, is the commander of the east, and Morley for the west. And the last one is, of course, of the north. So, yeah, they seem to be in charge of the revolutionaries for each of the blues. And them being in one place is a big deal. But yeah, more on this Lindbergh guy. He seems to be a mink. He's wearing a costume that's extremely similar to Sabo. He's wearing the same goggles and top hat, along with a cravat and a similar looking jacket. If I had to guess, he was inspired by Sabo at some point. Maybe Sabo saved his life, or maybe it's just a coincidence, or maybe he's just stealing Sabo's look. Maybe that's his gimmick, he steals people's looks. Because he's the only one who I haven't gotten a gimmick for. He seems to use some kind of unique weapons and jumps about a bit. If I had to guess, he might be some kind of tinkerer or inventor, but it's way too early for me to call something like that. The last one is Karasu, which I'm just going to call Crow because I don't want to butcher Japanese. His name literally means crow, that's why I'm calling him that. He reminds me a lot of the Vulture from Spider-Man. He's very silent, but he seems to be a human. You can see the shape of his ears, and that beak, it just seems to be an accessory or a mask he's putting on. So he's definitely not a mink, especially since the minks are a mammal-only thing as far as I'm aware. So a bird, or more specifically a crow, wouldn't fit that. However, I do concede that he most likely has a devil fruit, so maybe that explains his appearance. However, if I were to guess, his power doesn't make him look any different. He's just accessorizing to go along with his power. And the reason why I think that is that he's so prideful about his voice, because when Pinkbeard says he couldn't understand his mumbling, he gets really angry and gives a death glare. Other than that, he seems to be the silent type. And personally, he's my favorite design of these four. Honestly, I think that Morley is a bit too cartoonish for me. As well as Betty, I think her design's a little plain. The other two I think are really well designed, but ultimately what I was expecting is warlord kind of designs here. I didn't expect them to be emperor level or to be the most exciting thing ever. However, I expected them to be a formidable force. If you look at someone like Kuma, while he does look silly with his paw prints and his irregular shape and the little bear things on his head, he does have a really serious atmosphere around him. When he's in a room, you know he's a threat. And yeah, he used to be a revolutionary, and that speaks highly of this group's power, but the designs of these guys, in my opinion, don't seem strong enough to carry an arc. That being said, I do think that they're all well designed. It's not like Raizo or Weevil, where I had like depression after seeing their designs, because I was just building up Raizo in my head so much. And what we got, it was humorous, but I want a badass ninja, what can I say? Maybe we'll get one in Wano. But for these lot, I am a tiny bit disappointed, but I do think that they are effective as a elite fighting force kind of thing. Kind of like Eneru's priests, or the members of CP9 we meet once reaching Eni's lobby. They're not the most serious characters, however they work very effectively as foils for other characters. So I really want to see who they'll face off against. But what I'm hoping is that they are a lot deeper than their shticks would lead you to believe. So we basically get to see a showcase of them beating down the Pinkbeard pirates. Betty inspires the people, which makes Pinkbeard laugh. But yeah, her power just basically raises an army instantly. And we get a bit of face-palming exposition where Morley has to explain Betty's power. Yeah, we need to know what the power is, but to get it just basically saying, of course she can do that, she's got the most amazing power ever. It's a bit of clunky writing from Oda in my opinion. Usually he's able to fit in these explanations in a lot more seamless manner. However, I grant that he has a very limited amount of time to convey this information. Next up, we've got Lindbergh just shooting a bunch of cool blasts. It seems to be just like an ice ray, a la Mr. Freeze from Batman, so that supports my Tinkerer idea. Like, he probably invented that. Or maybe he stole it from Vegapunk, but who knows. And finally, we've got the crow guy splitting up and becoming a various number of crows. They all take the weapons of the pirates, and the rest of the civilians just beat the hell out of them. So this crow guy, this power, it looks a little familiar to me. It reminds me a lot of the way that Sabo left Dressrosa. Was this guy at Dressrosa? I think it would be interesting if he was. However, maybe someone that big of stature wouldn't be just hanging around with Sabo. But then again, Dressrosa was a really important mission, so I can see it going either way. But yeah, it's probably too much to be a coincidence, right guys? I mean, crows and the revolutionary, like, it just must be him as far as I'm concerned. That's the assumption I'm making. So yeah, basically, the Pinkbeard pirates, as I said before, jabronis. He was only worth 50 million. However, that's a lot of money to the people of this town. So the revolutionaries are like, here you go fam, you can have this money. And if you need anything from us, just call us. The revolutionaries will always have your back because you are ready to stand up against the man. And yeah, Betty basically has come around from calling them weaklings at the beginning to giving them support and hope at the end. And basically that's the chapter. We get a really nice introduction to these characters, but it is rather simple and bare bones. The entire chapter is basically 2 scenes, and that probably makes it feel very brief to most readers. So we end with Betty seemingly giving a Viver card, or maybe like a Denden Mushi phone number, I'm not really sure, but giving a piece of paper to the citizens, and of course the crowd start cheering, and the revolutionaries are like, yep, that's taken care of, let's go and beat up the celestial dragons. Now, of course, a stated plan never goes according to plan, so I doubt it will be as smooth as they say. But we do get some Oda boxes saying that it's 2 days until the Reverie, and the many variables of the world have begun to take shape. So yeah, as the box says, we're getting a clearer image of what Reverie will entail. But 2 days away, I thought that Reverie would be tomorrow, but it being in 2 days means that we might get a lot of stuff to do before the actual meeting itself. I'm expecting now to see Vivi disembark and maybe explore Merijua just a bit before the meeting. Because I can't see Oda just skipping these 2 days, I expect some events to happen here, but I'm not quite sure what. And that will do it for this chapter, guys. And yeah, ultimately for this chapter, I think it was a rather uneventful chapter compared to previous weeks, and after the 2-week gap, people will feel slightly deflated about it, but I think it works as an introduction to these characters. I am certainly hyped by the confirmation that Sabo and Dragon are fine. We're not going to retread any of the part 1 stuff. And also I'm hyped up that Dragon's going to take the fight to the Celestial Dragons. And it's nice to hear a bit of news about Germa 66. But ultimately, this chapter was all about the commanders, so it all comes down to whether or not you're interested in their introduction, their designs, their powers, their shtick, and whether you enjoy speculating about what they will do for the story. I personally really enjoy speculating, so my next video will be 100% speculation, predicting where this Reverie thing might go. So I hope you'll enjoy that video when it comes out. But in the meantime, I really enjoyed this chapter, and I hope you guys did too. And I also hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, leave a like, a comment, and a subscribe. Till next time, stay golden and farewell.